No rifle, no trap, yet they could feed an entire tribe. They lived in a world where every sound carried meaning. Survival depended not on the strength of weapons, but on the depth of knowledge. The indigenous peoples of America were masters of the hunt. They had made nature their greatest ally. Their methods were so effective that they were able to feed whole communities for thousands of years. Watch the video all the way to the end, because you'll see how a herd of bison could be trapped using only the wind's direction and the shape of the terrain, and how a plant-based poison applied to the tip of an arrow could stop even the largest beast. Now, I'm going to reveal the most closely guarded secret behind all hunting techniques. Before picking up a bow or spear, an indigenous hunter turned to his most powerful weapon, his mind. Success didn't depend on weapons, it depended on the ability to think like his prey. The hunt began long before leaving camp. The hunter observed the rhythm of the world. He studied the habits of animals, the paths they took, what they ate, and how they reacted to the weather. He knew where they drank, where they hid from the heat, and where they foraged at different times of the year. This wasn't just knowledge, it was a way of life fully immersed in the ecosystem. The hunter became an invisible part of the forest or prairie. He learned to move silently, control his breathing, and mask his own scent. His greatest virtue was patience. A hunter could lie motionless for hours, waiting for the perfect moment. He blended into his surroundings so completely that he looked like a rock or a bush, becoming one with nature itself. He read the ground like an open book. A broken branch, trampled grass, a faint track on dry earth. All of it told a story. From these signs, he could determine the species of the animal, its size, speed, and even how long ago it had passed. The hunter pushed all his senses to the limit. He caught the slightest sense, listened to every rustle, noticed the tiniest movement at the edge of his vision. His perception of the world was incredibly sharp and holistic. Special rituals were often performed before the hunt. This wasn't superstition, it was mental preparation, focus, and a way to ask the spirits of nature for luck. The hunter felt a deep connection to the world and respected the life he was about to take. This spiritual preparation was the foundation of his skill. It gave him confidence, calmness, and clarity of mind. Without it, even the finest bow would be useless. For modern people, imagining such unity with nature is difficult. While we rely on technology, they relied on themselves. Their minds were the sharpest compass and the most perfect weapon. I'm really curious. What do you think about this approach, where the main weapon isn't technology but a deep understanding of nature? Share your thoughts in the comments. The strongest bows were reinforced by gluing dried, softened animal tendons to their backs. That layer acted like a spring, greatly increasing the power and speed of a shot. The tendons were glued on with adhesives made from bone or hide. Bowstrings were also made from tendons or from strong plant fibers. They had to be thin, lightweight, and not stretch over time. The accuracy of a shot depended directly on the quality of the string. Arrows were no less complex than the bow. Their shafts had to be perfectly straight and smooth so their flight would be stable. For this purpose, young shoots of willow or other suitable plants were often used, straightened slowly over a fire. Arrowheads were made from stone, bone, or antler. Using specialized tools, thin flakes were chipped from a piece of flint or obsidian to give the head a sharp, symmetrical shape. Such an arrowhead had tremendous penetrating power. The feathers at the tail of the arrow served as stabilizers. Eagle or turkey feathers were commonly used, split and glued to the shaft. Proper fletching caused the arrow to spin in flight, which greatly improved accuracy. Mastering the bow took years of training. Hunters began learning to shoot as children. They could strike moving targets from long distances, shooting instinctively without deliberate aiming. There were different types of bows and arrows for different tasks. Short bows were convenient for hunting on horseback across the plains. Long, powerful bows were used for taking large game in the forest. The making and use of the bow represented the era's most advanced technology. It was the perfect fusion of natural materials and human ingenuity. This tool allowed the hunter to act quietly, swiftly, and from a safe distance. But the bow was most effective in the hands of an individual hunter. So how did an entire tribe hunt a massive herd? In the next chapter you'll learn about the grand and deadly method called drive hunting. Are you ready to learn the secret of how hundreds of kilos of meat could be taken in a single day without firing a single shot? The tribes of the Great Plains practiced a unique, large-scale hunting technique known as the bison jump, or, in local terms, the piskin. It was a true engineering and logistical operation that required the participation of the whole community. For this method, a high, steep cliff was selected. The site was carefully prepared and could be used for generations. At the foot of the cliff a pen of stones and logs was built to trap the fallen animals. The hardest part was getting the massive bison herd to move in the right direction. To do that, 2 long lines of stakes, stones, or brush were set into the ground along the route. These lines opened into a funnel, guiding the herd into the corridor. Dozens, even hundreds, of people took part in this operation. Young, agile hunters acted as drivers. Their job was to sneak up on the herd and gently steer it toward the funnel. The rest of the tribe hid behind stone barriers. When the herd entered the funnel, the hunters rushed out, waving hides and shouting. This created a living wall that prevented the animals from breaking out to the sides. A specially trained hunter, the buffalo runner, played a key role. He would don a bison hide, run ahead of the herd, and lead them toward the cliff. The role was highly honorable, but deadly. Frightened by the noise and movement, the bison panicked. They didn't see the cliff until the last moment. The animals behind pushed the front forward, and eventually the whole herd plunged over the edge. It was both a magnificent and terrifying sight. A living river of hundreds of powerful animals poured over the rim of the cliff. At the bottom, other hunters waited and quickly finished off the wounded. This kind of hunt supplied the tribe with vast amounts of meat, hides, and other materials for the entire winter, a triumph of collective strategy. The piskin was not just a hunt, it was a complex social ritual. This method shows that indigenous peoples were not only skilled hunters but also possessed engineering minds. They knew how to shape the landscape and organize hundreds of people around a single purpose. It was a battle won by intelligence, not brute force. What about the smaller game that made up the backbone of the daily diet? For that, native peoples developed countless clever traps and snares that worked without constant human intervention. The simplest and most common was the snare. It was made from strong cordage, sinew, cord, or even horsehair, and set along trails animals used often. When an animal passed through the loop, the noose tightened and a trigger mechanism engaged. Often a bent young sapling was used with the mechanism. When released it would straighten and lift the prey into the air. Another common device was the crush trap. A heavy log or stone was propped up by a complex arrangement of sticks, and bait was placed beneath it. When the animal touched the trigger, the weight fell. Nets woven from plant fibers were used to catch waterfowl. Nets were stretched where birds roost. At night hunters would scare the flock and the birds would fly straight into the net in the dark. Riverside tribes built complex fish traps as well. Walls of stones or driven stakes set across currents, leaving a narrow channel that funneled fish into woven baskets from which they could not escape. Pit traps were sometimes used for large game. Dug into animal trails and carefully camouflaged with branches and leaves, the pits often had sharpened stakes driven into the bottom. Setting and designing traps required deep knowledge. Where to place a trap, how to conceal it, and which trigger design to use for a particular species, all had to be planned carefully. The hunter had to think like both an engineer and a naturalist. These silent hunters worked day and night in every kind of weather. They were proof that effectiveness isn't always measured by strength or speed. Sometimes the simplest idea is the cleverest solution. Traps saved energy and time and provided food with minimal risk. This system was an integral part of a survival strategy based on intelligence and a profound understanding of nature. But how did hunters approach the largest and most dangerous targets? In the next section you'll learn about the spear and its more advanced ancestor. The spear is one of humanity's oldest tools. In the hands of an experienced hunter it could even stop a bear. But native peoples improved it with a simple yet brilliant device, the otlotl, the spear thrower. This simple tool, which significantly increased the actual range and power of a throw, effectively extended the hunter's arm. The otlotl, or spear thrower, was a rod with a socket at one end for the spear and a handle at the other. It acted like a lever, dramatically boosting the spear's range and force. Spears thrown with an otlotl could travel over 100 meters. This simple device changed the rules of hunting. It allowed hunters to strike big game from a safer distance. The impact was so powerful that the spear could pierce thick hides with enough kinetic energy. Using an otlotl required special skill. Movements had to be precise and coordinated, and mastery took years. Even after the bow appeared, when the forest offered no room for arrows, a short but powerful throw with an otlotl remained indispensable. This variety of weapons demonstrated humans' constant drive to make hunting more effective and safer. The otlotl represented the peak of ballistic thinking of the time, a force multiplier that focused human energy with maximum efficiency. But how could hunters get close enough to a sharp-eared animal without being noticed? A good weapon alone wasn't enough. The key was approaching quietly, without alerting the prey. Hunters were masters of camouflage. They blended into their surroundings using natural materials. Their clothing was made from hides matching the colors of the environment. They would smear mud or clay to obscure their body outline and mask human scent. Sometimes, they even rubbed the juices of fragrant plants onto their clothes and skin to mimic the forest's natural odors. The wind was both the greatest enemy and the best ally. Hunters always moved with the wind at their backs so their scent wouldn't reach the sensitive noses of prey. Sometimes an entire animal hide was used as camouflage. A bison hunter could wear a wolf pelt and crawl on all fours toward the herd. Bison aren't afraid of wolves, allowing the hunter to get remarkably close. Approaching prey was a slow, meditative process. The hunter moved with incredible finesse, distributing weight silently through the feet. He knew exactly which branch to step on, which rock to hide behind. When the animal lifted its head, he froze for minutes, remaining perfectly still at the slightest sign of disturbance. This skill was honed from childhood through games and training. Children learned to move silently and hide unseen. The art of invisibility wasn't just essential for hunting, it was vital for escaping enemies too. It required a deep understanding of light, shadow, sound, and scent. And what if deceiving the prey was necessary? In the next section, you'll learn about the art of mimicry. A hunter had to speak the language of nature as much as see and hear. The ability to mimic animal sounds was one of the most difficult but effective techniques. Special hollow bones, bent birch bark, horns, or even a simple leaf could be used to produce calls. Each call was shaped by long observation and experimentation. With a mimicry tool, a hunter could imitate the cry of a wounded young to lure in a predatory female, or mimic a male's mating call to provoke a jealous rival. Every sound was designed to elicit a specific response. Rhythm, tone, and volume were as important as the call itself. Without the right rhythm, the sound wouldn't be convincing. Visual deception was also used. A piece of white fur could be waved to imitate an antelope's tail. Sometimes full stuffed animal figures were created. Scented baits were common too. Hunters knew which scents attracted which species. These were cleverly used to draw animals into traps or ideal shooting positions. Using bait wasn't about tricking an animal, it was about communicating with it. All these techniques worked together: camouflage, silence, and mimicry wove an illusion the animal had to believe. This was the spiritual and intellectual pinnacle of hunting. Some tribes also relied on plant and animal poisons. Poisoned arrows allowed them to take down the largest and most dangerous game. Knowledge of poison was closely guarded and only taught to select members. Mistakes in preparation could harm the hunter. Poisons were made from the essence of certain plants, fungi, or secretions of some amphibians. Collection timing, production, and processing steps were strictly regulated and often ritualized. The resulting sticky substance was applied to the arrow tip. The poison had to act quickly yet not spoil the meat. The goal wasn't immediate death but to introduce the toxin into the animal's bloodstream. Even if the arrow missed a vital organ, the poison would weaken the animal over time. After such a shot, the hunter didn't immediately pursue the prey. He waited calmly for the poison to take effect and then tracked it quietly. This method allowed a single hunter to neutralize animals too large for a group to handle. Using poison required extreme care. Storage, labeling, and transportation were carefully organized. When processing hides, the poison section was cut away and discarded. Meat was often rendered safe through heat, so properly prepared game could be eaten. Poison knowledge reflected the native people's deep understanding of botany and chemistry. They could extract from nature not only food and medicine but also lethal yet controlled tools. This secret power gave them a huge advantage. Hunting wasn't just about feeding, it was the foundation of tribal life. A hunter's success was the success of the whole community. There were strict but fair rules for sharing the game. The person who killed a large animal did not keep it all for themselves. First, the best cuts went to those who helped, then to the chief and elders, and finally distributed to all families. Orphans, widows, and elders who could no longer hunt received special consideration. These rules were strict to ensure no one went hungry. Selfishness was condemned. Butchering and processing was also a collective activity. Men skinned and cut the meat into large pieces, women specialized in slicing thin strips for drying, preparing fresh meals, and processing hides. Every part of the animal was utilized. Meat eaten fresh or preserved as pemmican, hides used for clothing, shelter, and bedding, bones for tools, weapons, and ornaments, sinews for bowstrings and strong cord. Even stomach contents could be used for water containers. This waste-preventing approach reflected deep respect for nature. The animal's life was considered a gift for human survival, and nothing was wasted. The hunter gained not material wealth but respect and honor. Status in the tribe was measured by generosity and the ability to provide for the entire community, not just one's own family. This gift-based economy, unlike accumulation-based systems, kept the society strong and sustainable. In hard times, the most vulnerable were protected. At the heart of all these practices was a profound philosophy. Hunting wasn't merely killing, it was sacred, part of the great cycle of life. Animals were not just resources, they were acknowledged as beings with a presence similar to human communities. Before every hunt, the hunter prayed to the spirits, asking permission. He explained his family's need for food and promised to take only what was necessary. The belief was that if the hunter was pure and respectful, animal spirits would willingly give themselves. If greedy or wasteful, luck would turn away. After a successful hunt, rituals of gratitude were performed. The hunter thanked the animal spirit for its sacrifice, sometimes leaving a small piece of tobacco or singing a special song. This belief system ensured sustainable use of natural resources and prevented overhunting. Hunters saw themselves not as masters of nature, but as part of it. Their lives were intertwined with the lives of animals, plants, and the land. This perspective created a strong sense of responsibility. Tribal legends and myths were full of stories about hunters and animals. These tales taught youth proper attitudes toward nature and passed ethical norms and practical knowledge from generation to generation. Respect was also practical. Hunts were carried out as quickly and humanely as possible. A wounded animal was considered a bad omen, often interpreted as a sign of disrespectful behavior. This worldview was entirely different from modern consumerist approaches. For native peoples, nature wasn't a raw material depot, it was alive and spiritual. Their relationship with nature was built on mutual respect. The spiritual dimension could not be separated from practical applications. Ritual was as important as the sharpness of the arrowhead. When we put all these elements together, it's clear that Native American hunting was far more than food acquisition. It was a complex system combining deep ecological knowledge, engineering intelligence, creativity, social rules, and an advanced spiritual culture. They didn't just use bows and traps, they used their minds, patience, and an incredible understanding of the language of nature. Methods refined over centuries were perfectly adapted to their environment. They show that humans can live in harmony with nature, meeting their needs without depleting it. This is a hard but important lesson for our modern world, the value of maintaining balance. Share in the comments what topics you'd like to see in future videos on our channel. What else about the lives, beliefs, and social structures of Native Americans interests you? Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our research updates.